Hey friends. So I was listening to my book this morning, and this almost sort of, I mean, I guess not in passing, but something was said about, they're talking about race and racism and uh, privilege and the whole history of narratives around classes in society and classes based on race and how we have justified enslaving various peoples in various times and how narrative plays a role in that. And it was really kind of almost surreal because they started quoting Ibram Kendi, whose book I just read before this one, and I've talked about on this post. But something that showed up, or something that they said that then kind of flashed for me, was that we are hardwired, because narrative is such a fundamental aspect of how we make meaning. We are hardwired. Well, I don't know about hardwired. We have a powerful tendency to believe narratives that explain the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Now, from the point of view of spiritual conditioning, the spiritual process of looking at our conditioning, karma, as Sadhguru would describe it, this is kind of an obvious point, right? It's one that it's sort of it's a basic insight that we see the world through the lens of what makes us what we are. We assume that there's a set of assumptions. I mean, that's what conditioning is. Conditioning is a set of assumptions that make the world make sense to us. And as we know, if we can see through conditioning and transcend it, then by definition it can't be sort of finally true in any ultimate sense. We're not dealing with ultimate truth here. We're dealing with explanations of the world from the point of view of our perception. But what this sort of insight from Erzählende Affen, Storytelling Monkeys, by the way, is the title of the book. It's in German. What this insight sort of just pinged for me was that what was the powerful gravitational pull that we are going to have towards narratives that make our current situation make sense. So in other words, if we are privileged people, we are going to have an incredibly powerful proclivity to seek out and to filter incoming narratives for ones that give us the feeling that we want to have, that justify our sense of why we are where we are. And again, this feels like a kind of basic point when if somebody like Ibram Kendi would be like, yeah, that's the way it works. Duh, that's what I've been saying. But the sort of like wide-reaching scope of the book I'm reading right now has just, for me, I think, created an incredibly potent view of what's really going on there, because it's not even just, seeing our conditioning. Let's say that our conditioning was sort of objective, whatever that means. Our conditioning was there was no agenda in our conditioning. We would still have a lot of work to do. We would still, if we really want to break through to reality, if we really want to transcend the limitations of our current thinking and be able to grow into greater expressions of consciousness, we'd have a lot of work to do, even if there were no hidden agenda in us. But it turns out that in every case, there's going to be a hidden agenda. We are going to be filtering and being pulled towards certain kinds of conditioning. In other words, certain kinds of conditioning may be quite easy to see through. We might be able to assess them, approach them. They might not be loaded. Other kinds of conditioning are going to be almost impossible for us to question. It's going to be, especially if we're just doing this work alone. This is where the role of a kind of community and the role of multiple perspectives that are able to interpenetrate and able to interrelate and reflect to each other what each other are doing becomes so important, because it's like we're like magnets to stories that explain our conditions. And that's going to be true whether we're privileged people, especially when we're privileged people, but even if we're not, we're still gonna have story. Even if we're people who are not privileged in a given society, or at least not not necessarily the beneficiaries of kind of societal largesse, like we are, like for example, white people in America. Even if we're not, we're still going to find stories that explain our condition. That's the human mind has to make sense of life. And so our narrative making and our narrative seeking are they're all taking place in this context of what our reality feels like to us. And they're trying to bring the big picture that we see into alignment with the picture of here and now, the sort of like our role in the world picture. And so it's what popped into my brain was like, all of us have manifest destiny syndrome. Manifest destiny, which is of course a theory that's been completely debunked. We would never consciously ascribe to the idea of manifest destiny. We would think that was insane. But actually, under the surface, in our psyche, that's exactly what we're doing. We're not necessarily probing into reality going, what's wrong with this picture? Why is this the way this is? Does this have to be the way it is? Or are there causes for that we can affect and then change the way the world is and the world appears to us? We're actually, that's a whole, that's a process that I'm not saying nobody's doing that. I hope that people both in a kind of deep academic intellectual pursuit and people in a deep spiritual pursuit are doing precisely that work of trying to deconstruct how we're creating the world that we're in. But we're going to have a really, really, really powerful impulse to take the world as it is and create a story that justifies it, and create a story for why that's right, why it's right that we are where we are. Especially this is, especially relevant to privileged people, because we're not. It's like we're. It's not that we couldn't in any. It's not that we couldn't assume a different narrative, adopt a different narrative, but we want to be aware that we're not likely to gravitate towards those narratives, and we're not likely to put them in the forefront. We're not likely to want to shove them into the forefront of our consciousness unless we really make a big decision, unless we really make a choice that's like, okay, because it doesn't necessarily on the surface of things or in the short run benefit us to do so. It benefits us more, or at least it appears to benefit us more, to assume a narrative, adopt a narrative that actually explains why this is great and why this is right. I'm going to have to do several more posts on this, I can tell, because the story is really doing an incredible job of, this book is doing an incredible job of examining and describing how it is that we cast ourselves as the hero in every journey, in every narrative. What we need to feel, what are we trying to make ourselves feel when we adopt a narrative or when we engage with a narrative, and our own proclivity to see ourselves in the hero position, this sort of like archetypal. Joseph Campbell has mapped the world's stories to a large degree and found that these archetypal story templates appear everywhere, and the role of the hero and the challenges of the hero are they're incredibly consistent across time, across cultures, across geography. These types of stories have emerged everywhere, always, and they're part of our. It seems they're almost part of our hardwire. They're part of how this machine works. So again, both as just a human being registering this feels significant, but especially as someone who's really interested in looking at conditioning and figuring out what's really going on here. Feels like a significant insight. So that's what I got today. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.